Greetings to all our listeners at StockExplorers. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're focusing today on a company many of you might be watching, especially if you're interested in the energy sector, NuScale Power. It's definitely a relevant one for potential investors trying to navigate this space.
And we're kicking things off with something pretty topical. Those recent executive orders from the Trump administration on nuclear energy, they really set the stage for what's happening or what could happen with companies like NuScale.
Exactly. So our goal today is to, unpack NuScale Power. What's their business? What's the tech all about? And crucially for you, the investors, what are the upsides? What are the potential downsides, the risks? And finally, we'll look at the key things to watch out for, those future milestones. We'll try to keep it engaging, use examples where we can.
Okay, so before we zero in on NuScale specifically, let's just quickly break down what these executive orders actually mean. They came out in May 2025, 4 key ones. First off, nuclear energy development is now designated a national security priority. That's a big statement.
Right, so it elevates the whole thing beyond just energy policy. It's about security now.
Precisely. The second order, this one targets the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The aim is to foster a, quote, pro-development culture. And, maybe more importantly, cut reactor approval timelines down to just 18 months.
Wow, 18 months. Compared to how long it usually takes, that's incredibly fast. Can really speed things up.
It could be a massive change, yeah. Then, the third order creates a whole-of-government approach, basically telling all federal agencies, prioritize nuclear projects, siting, funding, permits, the works.
So trying to smooth out all that bureaucracy that can slow these things down makes sense. And the last one?
The fourth one reforms the Department of Energy's R&D programs. The idea is to align them better with national security, energy independence, and really focus on projects that are commercially viable, near-term stuff.
Okay, that focus on near-term commercial viability sounds like it could directly benefit a company like NuScale, wouldn't you say, since they're closer to market?
Absolutely. Yeah. That seems to be the intent. And one more thing, they invoked the Defense Production Act. This was specifically about the U.S. relying on Russia and China for enriched uranium for nuclear fuel, again, framing it as a security issue.
Okay, so taking all that together, these orders could potentially create a much friendlier environment for nuclear energy in the U.S. What's the big picture impact?
Well, the potential is huge. If they're implemented effectively, you could see, projects moving faster, maybe costs coming down, less uncertainty for developers. And tackling that fuel supply chain issue is also pretty significant for the whole domestic industry.
Right. Okay, that's really helpful context. So with that landscape in mind, let's dive into NuScale Power itself. For listeners maybe not familiar, can you give us the rundown? What do they actually do? What's their core tech?
Sure. NuScale Power is all about small modular reactors, or SMRs. Their main product is the NuScale Power Module, the NPM. You can think of it as a smaller, factory-built version of a traditional pressurized water reactor, a PWR.
Yeah.
That PWR technology is very well established.
And modular is the key word there, right? So you don't build one giant plant.
Exactly. The plant design uses these individual modules. You can have up to 12 together in one plant, generating up to 924 megawatts electric. That modularity gives you scalability. You can start small, add more later, flexible.
Now, NuScale hit a pretty big milestone already in the SMR world, didn't they? Something regulatory.
Yes, that was significant. Their original 50-megawatt design actually received full design certification from the NRC back in January 2023. That made them the first SMR company in the U.S. to get that far. It's a definite first-mover advantage on the regulatory side.
That seems like a huge head start. But they're not stopping there, are they? I understand they're working on an upgrade.
That's right. They're now pushing for an upgraded design, 77 megawatts per module instead of 50. They've applied for what's called a Standard Design Approval, or SDA, for this bigger version, and they're hoping to get that by July 2025.
Okay, SDA. How is that different from the full design certification they already got for the 50-megawatt version? Is it the same level of approval?
Not quite. Think of the full certification as the NRC saying, yes, this entire design is approved. The SDA is, well, it's more like a preliminary okay. It means that the design looks generally acceptable, but specific plants using it might still face more detailed reviews during their individual licensing process. So maybe a bit more uncertainty project by project compared to full certification.
Okay, that's a really important distinction for investors, that SDA isn't quite the final word. And thinking back to that original 50 megawatt certification, weren't there some safety or design questions the NRC raised even then? Do those carry over to this bigger 77 megawatt design?
Yes, that's a key point.
Yeah.
During the review of the 50 megawatt design, the NRC did raise questions. Areas like the shielding wall design, especially around large penetrations. Also, potential leakage from the system that monitors combustible gas inside containment. And maybe most notably, the stability of the steam generators.
The steam generators, what was the issue there?
Well, NuScale uses a novel helical coil design for its steam generators. It's different from traditional ones. The NRC, and particularly its Advisory Committee on Reactor Safeguards, the ACRS, had concerns about something called density wave oscillations, basically stability under certain conditions. They wanted more validation, especially because the design was new.
So these weren't fully put to bed with the first certification, and now they're increasing the power output. Could that make those issues more challenging?
That's certainly a consideration, yeah. Increasing the power density could potentially put more stress on components like the steam generators. While NuScale has obviously been working on these issues, the fact is we haven't seen one operate commercially yet. So some technical uncertainties just naturally remain until they're deployed and tested in the real world. How these points are resolved for the 77 megawatt design is definitely something to watch.
All right, that gives us a good picture of the tech and the regulatory side. Let's pivot now to the investment case. What are some of the positives investors might see in NuScale right now? Maybe start with their recent financials.
Okay. Their Q1 2025 earnings report, which came out in May, had some positive signals. They beat expectations on both earnings per share and revenue. Revenue hit about $13.4 million, which is a pretty big jump year over year and well above what analysts were forecasting.
Where did that revenue actually come from if their reactors aren't running yet?
Good question. It's mostly from pre-deployment services. A big chunk came from work on their project in Romania, the RoPower project, and a related tech license agreement. So it's important for investors to realize this isn't core product sales yet.
Got it. Pre-commercial revenue? What else looked positive in that report?
Well, their net loss was smaller than in Q1 of the previous year, and their operating expenses actually decreased. They also beefed up their cash position significantly. They ended the quarter with over $521 million in cash. That was partly thanks to raising money through an at-the-market, or ATM, share offering.
Right, that extra cash gives them breathing room. We saw some similar trends in their 2024 results too, didn't we? Revenue growth, lower operating costs?
Yes. The full year 2024 and Q4 also showed that pattern revenue up year over year, operating expenses down. Although, it's worth pointing out, the overall net loss reported for those periods was quite large. That was mainly due to some non-cash accounting things, like changes in the value of warrants, not operational spending blowing out, but it still impacts the bottom line number.
Okay, so financially, progress on the pre-commercial front, solid cash buffer. What about actually getting these SMRs sold and built? What's the path to commercialization look like?
This is really the main focus now. Their number one goal is landing that first firm SMR customer order by the end of this year, 2025. They're talking to a range of potential customers. Data centers are a huge one we can talk more about, but also industrial users, utilities, even AI developers needing dedicated power.
And how long can they keep going financially before they need those orders?
Based on their current cash, they estimate about a 2-year operational runway. And they figure that if they can book just about 25% of the revenue from an initial module order within the first year of signing a deal, that could potentially get them to cash flow positive.
So that first order really is make or break territory, it sounds like. Are they actually ready to build these things if an order comes in?
Their key manufacturing partner, Doosan over in Korea, seems ready. They apparently already have 12 of the NuScale Power modules in production. And they say they have capacity to ramp up to 20 per year if needed. So the manufacturing capability looks like it's largely in place. We're also hearing that their talks with potential customers are moving beyond just initial agreements, MOUs, towards negotiating actual term sheets. That's a positive sign of commercial traction.
Okay, so regulatory lead, improving pre-commercial numbers, manufacturing partner lined up, moving towards firm orders. What about the technology itself? Any specific advantages there?
Yeah, beyond being the first SMR design certified by the NRC, there are a few points. It uses that proven pressurized water reactor technology, which the industry knows well. The modular and scalable design we mentioned offers flexibility. And importantly, the design relies heavily on passive safety features.
Passive safety. That means it can basically shut down safely on its own using things like gravity and natural circulation without needing pumps or external power.
Exactly. That generally simplifies safety systems and is something regulators like to see. Also worth mentioning are their strategic partnerships.
Right. Who are their key partners?
Well, Fluor Corporation is a big one. They're the majority owner and bring essential engineering, procurement, and construction, or EPC, muscle. They're deeply involved in that Romania project. Then there's One Energy, their exclusive partner for global commercialization. Doosan, as we said, for manufacturing. They've also got links with a U.S. reactor forging consortium to help build out the domestic supply chain. And Samsung C&T is another investor and potential deployment partner globally.
That sounds like a pretty solid ecosystem of partners covering the bases. Now, you mentioned data centers earlier. AI growth is driving huge energy demand. How big a factor is that for NuScale?
It's potentially massive. I mean, the energy needs of these AI data centers are just exploding. We're seeing the global pipeline for SMR projects grow significantly, and a lot of that interest is coming directly from data center developers looking for reliable, carbon-free power right near their facilities. NuScale has said they're actively talking to these hyperscalers. They had a deal announced previously with Standard Power, although recent updates on that specifically might be a bit thin in the public domain right now. But the overall trend is definitely a tailwind.
Yeah, that demand for clean, reliable power, especially from tech, seems like it could be a game changer for SMRs in general and NuScale potentially. And what about government support? Beyond the new executive orders, have they gotten help before?
Oh, yes. NuScale has received quite a bit of funding from the Department of Energy over the years. That's been critical for their R&D and getting through the regulatory hoops. And the new EOs, as we discussed, could add more layers of support, faster NRC reviews, help with the domestic fuel cycle, maybe even opportunities to build on federal land, perhaps specifically for powering government or related AI data centers.
Okay, so definitely a lot of points in the plus column. But like any investment, especially in this kind of cutting-edge tech, there are risks. Let's talk about the negatives. Financially, you mentioned pre-commercial revenue, but they're still losing money, right?
That's correct. They are pre-profitable, still reporting net losses. And as we noted, they use that ATM offering to raise cash. While that shores up the balance sheet, it does mean issuing more shares, which dilutes the ownership percentage for existing shareholders. That's just the reality of equity financing for development stage companies.
So investors need to be prepared for the possibility of more share issuance down the road. What about those regulatory and technical risks we touched on?
Yeah, those are still very much present. That standard design approval for the 77 Mellowar design, again, it's not full certification, so hurdles could still pop up during specific project licensing. The unresolved questions around steam generator stability, especially with the power-up rate, remain a key technical uncertainty. And, we just have to acknowledge the timelines here. Nuclear projects take a long time. Commercial operation isn't really expected until the early 2030s. That's a long wait for potential returns.
Yeah, a decade is a long time in investing. How about competition? Is NuScale the only game in town for SMRs?
Oh, definitely not. The SMR space is getting quite crowded, actually. You've got major players like GE Hitachi, Rolls-Royce, Westinghouse, but also newer companies like TerraPower, Oklo, Nanonuclear, X-Energy. They're all developing different designs, sometimes using very different technologies, molten, salt, high temp, gas, fast reactors, compared to NuScale's more conventional PWR approach.
So it's sort of a tortoise versus hare situation. NuScale with the established tech versus maybe more advanced but less mature designs.
You can kind of see it that way. Plus, their business models differ too. NuScale is primarily a technology provider, while some competitors might aim to build, own, and operate the plants themselves. Each model has its own risk profile.
Okay, so competition is definitely heating up. Are there supply chain risks as well, getting the parts to build these things?
Yes, that's a concern across the nuclear industry. The supply chain for specialized nuclear components can be tight. Things like forging large reactor vessels. These are long lead time items. And remember that carbon-free power project cancellation a while back. Part of the reason cited then was uncertainty around LEU fuel availability. Now, NuScale uses standard LEU fuel, but it just highlights that broader supply chain and fuel concerns exist in the advanced nuclear sector, which can affect sentiment.
Right, ripples across the industry. And what about how the market views NuScale? Investor sentiment, stock behavior.
Well, the stock itself has been pretty volatile. It often seems to react more to news headlines than, say, underlying financial changes, which suggests it's viewed as quite speculative. There's also significant short interest in the stock. That means a lot of investors are betting the price will go down. It can lead to short squeezes sometimes, but it fundamentally indicates bearish sentiment. You also see a really wide range in price targets from analysts, which just reflects the uncertainty. And broader factors like higher interest rates making big projects more expensive or potential tariffs on materials could also be headwinds.
And one last potential negative, there were some reports about insiders selling shares recently.
Yeah, there has been some reported insider selling by several officers, including the CEO. Now, insiders sell for lots of reasons: diversification, personal financial planning, and sometimes sales are automated through preset plans. But, significant selling by top executives is something investors usually notice and might interpret negatively, rightly or wrongly. It's part of the overall picture.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground on both sides. So looking forward, what are the absolute key milestones investors should have on their radar for NuScale?
I'd say there are a few really crucial ones in the near to midterm. First, getting that NRC standard design approval for the 77 metal we design, hopefully by July 2025 as they expect. Second, and arguably the most important, securing that first firm commercial SMR order. Their target is by the end of 2025. That would be a massive validation. Third, keep an eye on the RoPower project in Romania. The target for a final investment decision there is late Q1 or early Q2 2026. Progress there is key for their international strategy.
Those definitely sound like the big near-term catalysts. Anything else further out or ongoing?
Yeah, definitely watch for developments and partnerships, especially any concrete deals with data center clients. That could be huge. Any new government policies or funding initiatives that emerge would also be relevant. And fundamentally, you want to see continued evidence of cost control, progress towards eventually becoming profitable, and critically, the successful resolution of those technical and safety items we discussed, followed by smooth operational validation when the first units do get built.
Okay, so quite a few things to track. It really seems like NuScale Power is, well, it's a complex story. Huge potential in a growing market, but definitely facing significant technical, financial, and execution risks. It really captures the innovative but challenging nature of the nuclear sector right now.
That sums it up well, I think. Yeah. What we've covered today should give you a good grounding for understanding NuScale. But, as always with investing, doing your own thorough homework is absolutely essential before making any decisions.
Absolutely. And on that note, maybe we can leave you with a final question to ponder. Given everything we've discussed, the rising global need for clean energy, the specific potential of SMRs, what do you think will be the single biggest hurdle NuScale has to clear to truly become a dominant force in this new nuclear landscape?
That's a great question to think about. And if you found this deep dive helpful, please do remember to subscribe to StockExplorers, maybe give us a like, and hit that notification bell. That way you won't miss our next exploration into the world of stocks.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Until next time, keep exploring.